It's now 1:30 and the regular meeting of the City Planning and Zoning Board will come to order. It is Thursday, November 19th, 2015. Preliminary matters, board additions or deletions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, the staff has no additions or deletions.
Board members?
No.
Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of our minutes from two meetings, the first being October 1st of 2015. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes, sir.
Are there any corrections to those minutes?
No, they're beautiful.
No.
Seeing none, I'm looking for an approval of the minutes from the October 1st meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. The second regular meeting is October the 15th, and has everybody had a chance to review those meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any corrections or deletions?
None.
None.
Seeing none, looking for a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Today, there has been a time for public comment is now. If you would like to speak on anything, that you can speak on anything you'd like to. That public comment is open to you now, but it will be also open again to you during each item on our agenda. So you can speak at this time, and you're kind of an independent speaking in general or specifically, or you can wait to the item that comes up on the agenda.
And the items on the agenda that are quasi-judicial, which is all of the items here today, need to be discussed at the time that the quasi-judicial matter is brought up.
Forgive me. Yes. I stand corrected. Okay. I usually do, by the way. So is there anybody has any general comments you'd like to come forward, please? Seeing nobody coming forward, I'll close public comment. The first item we have is an ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, requested by SJRT Real Estate Holdings, LLC, to amend the comprehensive plan future use map by changing the future use plan designation from HR residential high to C commercial for property located at 720, 724, and 728 Lantana Lane containing .74 acres more or less, providing for an effective date, and it's number C15000003 FLUM-map. And
Tim, do you want both of those two read together?
We'll do both together.
You like to do both?
You're going to have separate actions on both, but we'll hold
address
the
them together. Okay?
So read number 2 as well.
I will do that.
Thank you.
The second item then on the agenda is an ordinance the City of Vero Beach, Florida, requested by SJRT Real Estate Holdings, LLC, to amend the official zoning map by changing the zoning design designation from MR10 residential multifamily medium and high density to C1A tourist commercial for property located at 720, 724, and 728 Lantana Lane, containing .74 acres more or less, providing for an effective date. And this one is numbered Z15000006 MAP. And the presentation, Tim, will you be doing that? We have to go through the quasi-judicial. Disclosure by Planning and Zoning Board members of any ex parte communications, if any, on this item?
None.
None.
Yes, I would like to
Okay.
make a statement. I am a neighbor living on the east side of A1A in the Beach Walk condominiums at 940 Turtle Cove Lane. I did attend a Beach Walk condominium board meeting this morning, not having to do with this subject, but other matters of our association. And after that meeting was asked about the letter that we as neighbors all received, I stated then that I could not discuss the case that would be before me, but was asked about the two zoning designations in question, the RM10 and the C1A, and I did expound on what might be permitted under those two designations. I did not discuss the case. I have no personal interest in the property or the case and intend to discuss it here and vote independently of that.
Thank you. Any additional disclosures? Swearing of the applicant, staff, and all witnesses collectively by the city clerk.
If you're going to testify under these, if you would please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
And when any of you all come up to the podium to speak, if you could just state that you have been sworn, that would help us out. Thank you.
If there are any exhibits that will be presented today, please bring them to the city clerk's attention if you haven't already done so.
Say that again, please.
If there's any exhibits or anything you're going to use today, if they haven't, but please give them to the city clerk.
Or you can provide them after the hearing is over if you need to use them for your presentation.
Did you hear that? If you need them for your presentation, you can retain them until after the hearing is over.
I intended to hand out to each of the people on the board. Shall I give them to you?
You have a handout that you've already given to Sherry?
I haven't given it to anybody. Shall I give
You
it
can
to
just provide it when you come up.
And staff is going to make. Who's going to make the presentation?
Sherry's going to
Sherry, you're going to
I
make the
will,
presentation
yes.
for us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. Sherry Fitzgerald, City of Vero Beach Planning Department. As the chairman mentioned, the city received applications from the property owner requesting changes to both the future land use map and the zoning district map for the property located at 720, 724, and 728 Lantana Lane. The subject property is generally located along the west side of State Road A1A and is on the south side of Lantana Lane. The subject property includes approximately 0.74 of an acre and includes 3 parcels. On the map, on the overhead, and also in your packet, you'll see that's a location map and a future land use map. And you can see there's a large dark arrow pointing to the hatched area, and that's the 3 parcels in question today. The request is to amend the future land use map from residential high to commercial, and the zoning map from RM10, medium high, multifamily residential, to C1A tourist commercial services. The existing future land use and zoning in the area, as you can see on the map on the overhead, to the north of the property, the future land use designation is RH, residential high, and it's the brown colored area on the map. To the west and the south of the property, the future land use is residential low, and that's the yellow color on the map. To the east of the property, the future land use is C commercial, and that's the bright red color on the map. The corresponding zoning districts for the property include, to the north, there's RM10 multifamily residential, which is the green area. And to the west and south, the zoning includes single-family residential, R-1A, and as you'll see, that's the yellow colored area on the map. To the east and northeast of the property, the current zoning is C-1A, which is tourist commercial services, and that is the pink color on the map there. The existing uses include, on the subject property, there are 3 residential duplexes for a total of 6 units existing today. The surrounding uses include permitted and conditional use approval in the zoning districts mentioned, for example, the RM10 to the north, we have a residential duplex, 2 units, and a commercial parking lot, which is part of a restaurant and retail establishment. To the west and the south of the subject property, you have single-family residential uses, and to the east and northeast are commercial uses. Once again, mentioning the restaurant and the retail use, and then directly abutting the property on the east side is an office building. Transportation facilities, the subject property has road frontage on Lantana Lane, which is a city-maintained local roadway. The subject property is located approximately 150 feet from the intersection of A1A and Lantana Lane. State Road Highway A1A is a paved, divided, 2-lane state-owned road and is classified as a minor arterial, and the average daily traffic volume of that roadway segment in 2014 was approximately 15,000 trips. In the staff report, the staff compared the existing future land use map and the zoning districts with the proposed. And what I'd like to do is just summarize the summary of those differences or comparison just briefly. The existing RH residential high future land use category is intended for high density multifamily residential uses and areas which are a transition between multifamily and more intensive uses. The proposed commercial future land use categories apply to those areas that are suited for urban scale development and intensities and in areas in transition from residential uses to offices. The existing RM10 zoning district, it allows mostly residential uses as the name or the title implies. Also, it permits adult congregate living facilities and nursing homes. The proposed C1A zoning district, as its title, it allows mostly commercial uses, but it also allows multifamily residential uses. So that's a brief summary of the differences in the uses there. Also, in the staff report, we provided a comparison of the development guidelines of the 2 zoning districts to give you an idea of the differences, and I'll just summarize those briefly. The residential densities for the existing zoning, maximum 10 units per acre. The proposed zoning, 15 units per acre. Efficiency units and hotel-motel densities, they're not allowed in the RM10 existing zoning, and in the proposed C1A district, the maximum density there is 18 units, and hotel motels are allowed in that zoning district. The open space, they're similar for both. The floor area ratios are slightly different. The RM10 is 0.40 maximum. The C1A is 0.50 maximum. The building heights are the same. The setbacks are similar. There's some variations. In the C1As, there are occasions where there are 0 setbacks, but it varies by project and by location. Also included in the staff report, the staff reviewed and analyzed the proposed changes with our land development regulations. And the first item that we're required to look at, as well as the applicant that submits the proposed changes, is the justification for the amendments. And the applicant's justification for the amendments include that the subject property has been used as short-term rental units since the 1970s, and the current property owner is doing business as Orchid Island Cottages since 2011, which is also short-term rental units. But under the current zoning district, this is not a permitted use, and within the past few months, the property is under code enforcement action. The staff findings for the justification is as follows. Under the current RM10 district, this use is not a permitted use, and within the past few months, as I mentioned, the property has been under code enforcement action. Since that time, the applicant has entered into a compliance agreement with the city to become compliant with a date certain. And in order to do that, the proposed amendments would allow the property owner to be conforming to the city codes if the zoning was changed to the commercial C1A. So that's the reason and that's the justification for the proposed changes, is to bring the property into compliance with the current use. Another standard that the staff report includes, is, are the proposed amendments consistent with the comprehensive plan's goals, objectives, and policies? And one of the land use elements, one of the key land use elements that we looked at is policy 1.10, which gives the designation of the commercial land use designation, which is what's being requested today. And that policy states that the commercial land use designation shall be applied to those areas that are suited for urban scale development and intensities. They should be limited to lands that are located near existing urban centers, near the center of several neighborhoods, areas in transition from residential to offices, and located at high access points such as intersections of arterial streets and adjacent to arterial or collector streets. The subject property is located near existing C commercial future land use designations, as we pointed out earlier, to the east, the red area on the map, and to the on the northeast corner across the street from Lantana is also commercial future land use. It is located near existing residential neighborhoods to the west, northwest, north, and south. The subject property is adjacent to an existing office complex to the east, and it is located approximately 150 feet from the intersection of A1A, which is an arterial roadway. Based on that analysis, staff finds that the requested amendment is consistent with policy 1.10. In addition to the consistency with the comprehensive plan, also looked at whether the proposed rezoning request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and our land development regulations. And one of the criteria that we use to review that consistency is whether the amendment is consistent, once again, with the land development regulations. And in particular, section 62.34 states that the purpose of the C1A commercial district is to allow adequate space and appropriate highly accessible locations, accommodating commercial development, including multifamily residential structures and hotels or motels oriented to seasonal or transient residents. The requested amendment does expand the existing C1A zoning district to the east and northeast of the subject property, as we've shown you on the map here. As you can see, the pink area is existing C1A zoning to the east and across the street to the northeast of Lantana. Such expansion is generally a consistent progression in the development of the commercial zoning and uses in this location. Therefore, the staff finds that the requested amendment is consistent with that standard of the zoning district standards and criteria. An additional criteria that was required for a review is whether the proposed change in zoning is compatible with the immediate vicinity of the uses and the zoning of the subject property. The staff also looked at that and provided details in your staff report. And once again, I will briefly go over those for you. As I mentioned earlier, directly abutting the subject property to the west are single-family residential uses. Across Lantana is a residential duplex and a commercial parking lot, which is a grandfathered-in non-conforming use in that zoning district. And that area across Lantana is RM10 zoning. As mentioned earlier also, that across Lantana and northeast is a commercial retail establishment with associated parking just to the west of there. Both properties are C1A tourist commercial services. And to the east is also that professional office building I mentioned earlier. The existing uses and the zoning to the east and northeast of the subject property include commercial uses and are zoned the same as the proposed C1A zoning district. The least compatible zoning district is to the proposed zoning is the R-1A, which is the single-family residential zoning to the south and to the west, that the yellow color on the map. The staff acknowledges that these properties may experience any potential future impacts of the proposed change in zoning. However, it should be noted that the property to the east and southeast of the subject property is zoned C1A and abuts existing single-family residential zoning and uses. Based on the above findings, the staff finds that the requested C1A zoning district is compatible with the RM10 zoning to the north and the C1A zoning in the immediate vicinity. Staff does acknowledge that the possible incompatibility with the adjacent R-1A single-family residential zoning to the south and to the west. The change in conditions, that's another criteria that we're required to look at in the code. And basically, the applicant must show us that there are changing conditions to the property, the neighborhood, or in the area of, in the vicinity of the area that the property is located, which warrant an amendment. And as stated earlier, the property has been used as short-term rental units since the 70s. And once again, over the past few months, the property has been under code enforcement action. Also, as noted above, the C1A zoning and uses exist within the neighborhood and in the area, and in particular including the properties that have roadway frontage along State Road A1A. Therefore, the staff finds that the proposed C1A zoning is generally warranted due to the already existing commercial zoning and uses in the area. And an additional criteria that the code requires us to look at is the maintenance of level of service. And all the public services and infrastructure has been found to support the proposed change and maintain the level of service, such as water, sewer, schools, etc. And we did provide additional information on the traffic, because generally that's the one that most people are look to. The traffic report that was prepared by the applicant's consultant assumed a hypothetical, and once again, this is hypothetical because this is not a site plan. It's a land use change and a zoning change. So we really don't know what potentially will be developed there, when or how, because we know what's there now. We just have to look at all the uses and analyze those. So hypothetically, the traffic report looked at a 7,200 square feet specialty retail commercial building use. And based on that assumption, the analysis came up to approximately 319 daily trips, 20 p.m. peak trips, and 7 a.m. peak hour trips. If the subject property retained its current zoning and added an additional unit, just to give you a comparison, estimate of the resulting trips would be approximately 47 trips per weekday. We do want to note that the highest potential traffic generator in the proposed C1A zoning district would likely be a driving bank use. However, the location of the subject property and the lack of road frontage on an arterial roadway, the more practical use that was used as part of the analysis for the site is the specialty retail commercial use. The potential impacts to the intersection of A1A and Lantana and the surrounding neighborhood streets, such as Club Drive, Turtle Cove, and others, would likely need to be reviewed if the subject property is developed, once again, via a site plan process, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of any higher intense commercial land use. The traffic report findings indicate that the proposed rezoning and the corresponding analysis and assumptions meet the traffic concurrency requirements of Indian River County and should not significantly impact the level of service along A1A. The staff findings are based on the above analysis and assumptions, and once again, they're more detailed in the staff report, that the requested rezoning should not have an adverse effect on the land use standards, level of service standards, for public services and infrastructure. But the staff does acknowledge, and we've mentioned this in our report, that the actual and ultimate impacts will need to be determined if and when an actual site plan application is submitted and reviewed for the subject property, because that's when we would know exactly what type of use and all the potential impacts would be addressed then. Based on the analysis and findings outlined in detail in the staff report, the staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Board consider approval of the ordinances, approve submittal of the ordinances to the City Council for favorable consideration. And with that long-winded summary, we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
That completes your presentation then?
Yes,
No
sir, it
witnesses?
does.
Okay.
Yes,
Questions of staff at this point in time?
Not right now.
Not just yet.
Same here, not just yet. Okay.
Not just yet.
Not just yet. Okay. The applicant is here today. Would you like to come forward and make a presentation? Please give us your name and identify you have been sworn in.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott McGuire with Knight McGuire & Associates, representing Ms. Tilton and SJRT today. And yes, I have been sworn.
Thank you.
First, I'd just like to thank Tim and Sherry for, putting in all the effort and work. These things never are easy, and I acknowledge it takes a lot of work to get to the point where we are, and I thank them for that. I'd like to just give a real brief history lesson on how we got to where we are today with this property and its use, and eventually getting to a point where we're asking for rezoning. I gave Sherry a couple of, I think 5 copies of an aerial that was taken back in 1970, just to kind of give a feel for what this area looked like back. This is actually taken 11 years after this property was first developed. These buildings were first built in 1959, which, when you go back into the records for building permits, site plan approvals, there really isn't anything there. That's a little old. Records aren't so great back from 1959. So basically, we've got a 0.74 acre parcel. If you count all 3 pieces, there's 3 separate tax parcel IDs here. That are under consideration. They're all under the same ownership. If you take a look at that aerial, you can see there's a red circle around the 3 buildings that were originally built in 1959. And you'll see there was no Castaway, there was no 17th Street Bridge, there was no Rio Mar Bay 2, there was no moorings, there was no 7-Eleven, there was no commercial, anything on the road there. I'm not sure when A1A was originally built, but you can see in that area also Club Drive, which used to be the main north-south thoroughfare here, still continued south and joined back in with A1A right through the heart of where Castaway is now. So it was quite a different program back then. So 1959, it gets built. Sometime, we're not really sure what happened in the early 60s through the 60s, but when we get into the 70s, it's apparent that it started to be operated as a motel. So we've got clients that have been coming for many, many years, year after year, and coming to the same little place, enjoying the quiet. So back in the 70s, they start using it as a hotel. Occupational licenses are issued. Hotel and sales taxes on rentals is paid, and that happened continuously until the present day. Then basically as it operated, it changed hands a number of times. The most recent ones are 2002, it was sold, 2005, and then in 2011, it was sold to SJRT. At that time, they transferred and applied for and received all the licenses necessary to operate as a motel. They secured a mortgage based on operating it as a motel. And they just continued to operate as it had been for 40 or so years. The building's 55 years old, about 40 years of short-term rental or hotel use. So fast forward to 2015, the city of Vero Beach has some problems with short-term rental, as we all know. People abuse the system. It's all in the residential zoning district, which we happen to be in. We are an intense use in the residential, but we're not the lightest use, but we are residential. So the city has no ordinance or no way of approving any type of motel in any type of residential, whether it's RM or any type. There just isn't a mechanism. So during this time, we get called to code enforcement. So at that point, Ms. Tilton calls me and says, I don't know what's going on here. What's happening? So we sit down with Tim, go through all our different options, take a look at what's been happening, what we intend to continue happening, and what also happened in the city with some of these other projects that were kind of abusing the program. We talked about potentially grandfathering. That didn't really seem to fit. I think that was Tim's opinion at the time. We didn't really push it. We're just trying to figure out a way to get this thing where it can stay the way it is. We talked about an ordinance modification, maybe writing into RM10 an allowable motel. Probably wasn't going to get any support from Tim. So we said, well, what do we need to do? He said, well, the only option we really have is to move ahead to a comp plan and rezoning, get yourself this commercial designation, you'll be conforming. So that's why we're here today. Since the C1A is the least impactive of all the zonings that actually allows motel, that's what we're asking for. If there was a less impactive one, we would ask for that. There isn't. There is no other option for us. So SJRT and Ms. Tilton spend a bunch of money to make the application, pay for traffic reports, get me up here to go through all the different things and make the applications. So here we are today. We're taking the only road we have to keep this project viable, to keep it open, to keep it doing what it's been doing for 40 plus years. We're not developers trying to, finagle our way in and get a zoning so we can, develop a piece of property. We just want to continue to operate. So if there was any other way to do this, we would be looking at doing it. But we are told, and as my understanding, that there is no other option for us. So we just simply want to be able to operate this as we have for 40 years. If there's any other way to accomplish this, we're more than willing. We understand this is to be our only option. So we just ask to be treated fairly. I think very few, if any, people would think that what we're doing down there is wrong, and it seems fair to me that we be able to continue to operate as this very small 6-unit, low-impact motel that, as far as I understand, hasn't been a problem for the neighbors. Other than that, since we're forced to look at C1A, the big issue that I feel like everybody's going to be talking about is compatibility. So as an engineer, what do? I look at the zoning map. Where else does this interface occur between C1A and R1AA? Right next door. It's right there. It already exists. That interface exists immediately adjacent. There's a number of other places, mostly in Central Beach, where the same interface exists. So we're not doing something that hasn't already been done all over the place in the city. And the only reason we're doing it is to try to keep our existing use intact and not be forced to go out of business. That concludes my presentation if anybody has any questions.
You referred to your existing use a whole lot, and that's rentals. What period of time are you renting for?
I think, was it minimum 3 days, or is there even a minimum?
Weekly and during 4 days, weekends.
Okay, thank you.
Can you answer that?
Yeah, so it's
please?
Basically, and you can rent for a weekend.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Your person that you're looking for, when they purchased the property, were they aware of the current zoning on the property?
I do not believe that their due diligence turned up the portion of the ordinance that was never enforced by the city. No.
No, I'm just asking about the zoning.
The zoning is, yes, they were aware of
thanks.
exactly what the zoning was.
Thank you.
Because we're talking about zoning and we're not talking about a site plan, I think it limits some of my immediate concerns I always have if you were bringing a site plan to us.
Right.
And before, I believe there'll be a lot of people come up here and speak shortly, and I believe I as a neighbor, I would have probably some of the immediate concerns that they have of what could be if the zoning and board and the city council were very open-minded and very liberal within their interpretation of what you might want in the future. It could cause them significant consternation, is the way I would feel as a neighbor. And yet if the neighbors come up here and speak and say that the existing business is not causing them a negative impact, and they indicate to me that what's existing there is appropriate, and especially when I see this that shows that you were there prior to, and before they even exist, other than the person to the, I guess it's the west of you, that looks like that home might have been there about the same time. I would want to try to help. So I think we have to wait and see, from my opinion, to see what we can turn up here today to see what's the most logical and most appropriate plan to overcome the obstacles that we're involved with right now.
And again, if there is a mechanism that I am not aware of that allows us to utilize the property as it's been without allowing these other uses, we're all for it.
And once I think that will come up with some discussion pretty shortly.
Okay,
Additional
thank you.
questions?
I have one question
Sure,
for
go ahead.
Mr. McGuire. My concern, and maybe you can address this on behalf of the owner, my concern in changing this to a commercial zoning, and this owner sells at some point in the future. How does the residential Castaway Cove and to the west and north of this property how are they protected against something else being developed under this proposed zoning that would, in fact, be counter to what's there now?
Right. Under this proposal, we are sort of hogtied by virtue of having to go with the C1A. What's allowable in C1A is allowable in C1A, whether it's sold or not. It's C1A zoning. The protection is by virtue of the site plan approval process, the rules that have been written, the ordinances that are in place, the buffering, all of that type of stuff. And by virtue of the fact that we're 0.74 acres, pretty limited in what could actually be done there. It's really kind of a postage stamp piece of property. So you couldn't develop it as a restaurant. It just wouldn't, there's not enough room. You put 20 parking spaces in there and it just wouldn't work.
Why didn't you come forward with a site plan with the existing improvements on it?
Because it's not allowed in the current zoning district.
No, a proposed site plan